And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the last leg of our event, the leaderboard in conversation with our experts. We have with us some eminent personalities to discuss the current scenario as well as share their perspectives on a very pertinent topic today, going global for scaling new heights. And of course, they are addressed and to all our exporter fraternity today, and I'm very sure it will be absolutely insightful for you. Now, just before we delve into the panel discussion, a little bit of information for all our viewers. You have a chat box section where you can put in your questions and you can ask our panelists. Please do not forget to type in your name as well as the name of the person or the panelist you wish to address your question to. And of course, needless to say, you can also tweet and talk about it by using the hashtags hashtag BAB as well as hashtag GrowWithDNB on Twitter, on LinkedIn, as well as on Facebook. It's all up to you. But please do make sure you share your thoughts and share, of course, a couple of questions with us as well. And without further ado, I would like to now call upon Dun Bradstreet's Chief Global Economist, or rather, I would say Global Chief Economist, Dr. Arun Singh. A little bit about Dr. Arun Singh. Dr. Singh is a professional economist with more than 15 years of experience in macroeconomic research and analytics. His area of work has spanned across quantitative and qualitative economic research, econometric modeling, commodity research, and industry research across a wide spectrum of sectors. And joining Dr. Singh today, we have Mithileshwar Thakur, Additional Director General, Ministry of Commerce in India. You have his profile up on the screen for you to view. Then we have Dr. Badri Narayan Gopal Krishnan, Lead Advisor and Head Trade and Commerce, Niti Aayog. We then have Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi, Dean, Institute of Foreign Trade. Following Professor Rakesh, we have Mr. Yaduvendra Mathur, Vice Chairman, Consulting Engineers Group. And without further ado, I would now request all our panelists to please come on stage and join us. And over to you, Dr. Arun Singh.
Thank you, Naina, for such a wonderful introduction, and I'm looking forward to have a really great session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which market you are joining in. Welcome to today's panel discussion that's going global, scaling new heights. Today we have, as you know, Naina said that we have a prominent personalities across government and academia to discuss the subject and share their valuable insights. If I go back a few years, earlier, we have seen that there was increased thrust and the focus by the government and other stakeholders to increase India's share in the global trade. Many initiatives being taken, policies being framed, and measures initiated to tap that opportunity. We have achieved some successes, some learning, and now we are looking forward to leapfrog. If I have to talk about some of those supports by the government that revolve around market diversification, product competition, country to country alignment, infrastructure improvement, and more important consideration for factory gate to port infrastructure to manage or to decrease the dwell time and cost. And that was the biggest issue cited by many exporters, many companies in India for many years. I think many initiatives being taken. Now, there are internal initiatives taken by the government, which are basically going to discuss today. But there's some opportunity. Those opportunities, basically the base of those opportunities, very crisis, what I can call it. And there's a health crisis, and there is a global economic crisis. There's a two which is going today. One, the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic. The pandemic has disrupted the supply chain across the globe. This unprecedented crisis has given a new set of risks for all the businesses, not just in the domestic market, also in the global market. Global companies are now looking to dealing the geographical risk, and that's exactly the great opportunity for Indian exporters to re-strategize their business to push for self-reliance and enhance capacity to become the manufacturing hub for the world in the coming years. And I can see some of improvement there. Why? Because when I look at my DNB data, by the time we will complete our panel discussion today, around 400 companies would have been already inquired by our global counterpart. They are basically looking for the new customer, the new supplier, new vendor for a better opportunity. That number is almost doubled as compared to pre-pandemic level. So that's a great opportunity pandemic has provided. Of course, that's a health crisis. But another crisis is unfolding is the Russian-Ukraine crisis. Companies are looking for the new suppliers who basically new new vendors to diversify if they're supplying or getting goods from the Russia supply and the sanction entities. So there are opportunity for Indian exporter, and I think exactly we are going to have a conversation around that. Are we ready? In this conversation, we are going to find the answer. Are we ready? Are all stakeholders in this journey ready to capitalize these opportunities? Today, we are going to find about some seven key subjects in terms of the discussion. That's impact on the ongoing geopolitical crisis, India's positioning in the emerging global value chain, increasing protectionism in the global trade, India's free trade agreement status, government initiatives for ease of doing business across borders, need to enhance export competitiveness, and the seventh and the last one, which is basically very important, is basically finance availability. So with that, I will move to our first speaker, Mr. Joshi, Professor Joshi. Sorry, my bad. Uh, as I said, there is two things happening today. We are going through two major crises. One still not over, while people are saying that it's over, and maybe they have some foresight might be over in 2022, but we don't know. And another one is basically hitting Russia and Ukraine crisis. The current geopolitical crisis between Russia and Ukraine have literally damaged the economic prospects across countries and already impacted by the pandemic. How bad, how devastating it could be from a world trade perspective when you talk about what will be the short term and long term impact of sanction imposed by the NATO nation and the counter sanction going to be by Russia. What is your view in that, Professor Joshi?
Thank you so much, and namaskar to everybody for inviting me for this August forum. And I'm very happy. I think the subject you have chosen today was, the getting opportunities beyond border. Going global for scaling new heights. And I'm very happy to talk about it as a professor of globalization. We have, traditionally, or the economists have traditionally talked about globalization and global value chain. So secret of success under all trade theories, theoretically was said that, there has to be a free trade, free movement, global value chain, and, probably this is the only secret of success. And India, we used to say that, our lack of economic development was because India has not been integral part of the global value chain, was considered to be one of the big weaknesses. And I think last year, soon after pandemic, you are very right to say the entire global value chain got disrupted. Disrupted because of the pandemic started in China. And I'm told that today also, as on date, China is the worst hit. So China basically account for 32% of the world manufacturing, and therefore for supply of all the product it was dependent on Chinese, the global value chain, in which the China was an integral part of that. Incidentally, India was not a part of that, the global value chain. And then now you see, before the pandemic, we were coping off the pandemic because the world trade, slumped down, not only in India but across the border, because of disruptions in the supply chain, and the disruption in the demand. Services sector absolutely out of gear, or totally failed. Now the new situation which has arrived because of the conflict. You talk of a war or a conflict, I think you can use any term that you want, is absolutely this conflict resulted in the economic sanction. And as the President Putin has already talked of, the putting economic sanction equals to initiating a nuclear kind of a war, or initiating a war. And therefore, I think a few days back he threatened for a nuclear war, primarily because of the economic sanctions. Now if you see, the whole the concept of globalization has gone to a, the rethought, or a retrospection. I think last year I wrote an article for Financial Express, wherein I wrote about that, the globalization at the crossroad. The economist or the trade theories, you talk at the theory of the comparative advantage or an absolute advantage or factor endowment. We talked of, the global trade or the international trade is beneficial for countries and the societies. And you have seen in the post-pandemic era, every country wanted to have protectionistic measure and what we call as a self-reliance or Atmanirbhar. India came out with the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and probably, not only India, but all countries across the world. You talk of America, again to quote, the President Trump, who is a great businessman, and who don't mince his words, talking about that, he said the America first. And he said that, I'm not the president of the world, I'm president of America. And he said, protecting the interest of, you have seen in France, Germany, wherein, the political parties which came in power basically because of the protectionistic measure. Brexit, you have seen, absolutely, we have done a lot of research on. Now with this, the new thing, I think again the thought has come that, there is no shortcut to self-sufficiency. You do not know that your supply chain is broken tomorrow, and therefore, you need to be, the countries need to prepare themselves, to be self-sufficient for their. Now in this, you have seen that, the almost all supplies from, Russia is absolutely broken. Even the financial payment system, the SWIFT was withdrawn, which has given a lot of, not only a lot of problem, but more than that, it has, going to give a lot of case study and matter for research, that what countries have to do under these circumstances. Now incidentally, India, we have also, working on our own payment system. Russia also has got their own payment system. China has also got on their payment system. Now we are talking of the, the payment system of China and Russia clubbing together. And I think probably the time has come that, India will also have to strengthen its system, not only within India, but we need to leverage it, across the world, so that with the fall of the SWIFT, everything does not go out. Number two. Now, especially the country like India, we are in a very, very, delicate situation. You talk, the between the devil and the. So what is happening now is India, I'm not talking of the political compulsions, but India's defense sector even today has got 60 to 70% of the defense equipment bought from Russia. Now this defense equipment also require the periodical servicing or a very regular servicing. Number one. Second thing is, India is having, the problem what we call the some hostility with China. If you don't talk of war, we also have do hostility with our, with our Western neighbor. That is another problem. Now our hostility with the Western neighbor and their friendship with the our northern neighbor is another matter of deep concern from India. And therefore, you can neither say no or yes in this situation. And so situation is very typical. Anyway, I'm very happy that I think the India has taken a, very, very balanced view, but I'm not very sure that, till what time that this balanced view lasts. Another thing, that the hike in the commodity prices. Russia is an economy which is much smaller than India. Russia's total export is also no match to that of China. China is the largest exporter in the world with 14.23% of the world market. Russia is absolutely, their share in international market is less than us. India's share is 1.7% in the international market. So what is happening is 1.6, 1.7. So what is happening? But now what Russia export? China's basic export is the manufactured goods, or what we call is, the manufactured goods, part, machinery. But Russia's basic export is the raw material, basically the mineral. Then it comes to, the petroleum, gas. And if you see, that Russia supplies petroleum and gas to the whole of the European Union, including America. But now with the sanctions, it was said that the prices of the petroleum will hike. So that was only thing. And if you see, Russia is absolutely in trouble because of these sanctions, but the European Union is probably more in trouble because of these sanctions. Because rise in petroleum price will rise the cost of almost every industrial activity which is being done in the European Union, and that would impact the competitiveness. Then we came about identifying alternative like OPEC restricting their the production, so that the petrol prices does not goes up. And if you see now, I probably the time has come, I think probably first time in my life that I'll be able to do the research in this kind of a situation, geopolitical situation, especially on the international trade and international market, how to find the success and transforming the calamity into an opportunity. Now India is also eyeing for a cheaper oil, because nobody buys from Russia if you only buy. Yeah, so we call it an oligopsony kind of a concept. So if 2-3 countries buy, so I think we may get benefited. India, as you are aware, that now I think India 80-85% of our the oil we are dependent on import, and
Yeah.
oil is a key reason which determines our trade deficiency. Yeah, or balance of trade, the balance of trade or trade deficit. So you need to find an opportunity again, like in pandemic. The global value chain got disrupted, so the new value chain was to be established.
Yeah.
And if you see, India has done relatively better or much better compared to other countries. Might be because n number of reasons, but somehow we have performed better. And our the export and import, especially in 21-22, 38% almost it grew. Import grew even higher. So if you see, we are likely to touch the target of 400 billion US dollar in this financial year. And if the commodity prices goes up, we'll touch that much better earlier. So we need to find out opportunity in this calamity, which this new situation has created. So I think again, then sourcing. Now certain products on which we are very dependent on import, sunflower, 70% of the sunflower we import only from Ukraine and Russia, both of them together account for 1/3 of the wheat export across the world. And the wheat exporting country, incidentally, India also exports wheat now. Yeah, so farming, we are not only sufficient, we
Yeah.
export wheat. India can find, the price of the wheat in the international market goes up, so we get more profit. So I think anyway, but as a country, there has to be a balance kind of a situation. And I think, as we'll talk later, that India has done a lot of structural reform, the institutional infrastructure. We have done a lot of reform in the policy infrastructure. We have done a lot of reform in the financial infrastructure. And I'm very sure that, I'm very optimistic about Indian economy. I am very optimistic about the country like India. When you see, again, when you talk of, our neighbors, our rival Western neighbor, I don't want to name, when the Prime Minister yesterday said that he does not become the Prime Minister to watch for the price of that, tomato and the onion and the potato. But in India, 3 governments have gone only and only because of price of onion. So I think all these things are coming into the Chinese stock in the last 1.5 year in the America has fallen to 1/3, 4 trillion to 1 trillion. So we need to find out opportunities in this, and I'm very optimistic about India. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joshi, for such a wonderful explanation. And I think you've touched base certain key element of this Russia-Ukraine crisis and how it's going to change those global mix. Because we were looking at some of the data. There are many suppliers based out of. We came up with a paper. In fact, there are 400,000 suppliers based on Russia and the Ukraine who are doing to the Western nation, the European, and then some other Asia Pacific market. The finding alternate supplier, finding alternate customer is going to be challenging as well as opportunity. That's same thing. And in fact, you touched at one point that Europe is fully dependent. Some of those countries, 100% of their energy are imported from the Russia. Whether they can go with what's happening or they can find a solution to reach some consensus, so at least war is not heading towards some full-fledged crisis. So I think there is many element happening, but that's provide opportunity. And I think you touch base one point on the protectionism. That's true. For some time we can see it's not about extremely visible on the face, but there are many other elements happening, and I think that could be going to be another factor. I think we should be worrying about this one. With that, I think there are other burning issues in the past. And Professor Joshi, I will come to you on that point. The second thing is that Mr. Thakur, I have one point to as a follow-up piece about Professor Joshi have just said, that when we talk about the global value chain and right from here to customer end, there has to the India is still trying to get into this one. What strategy you think India should adopt to be a really benefiting from this global value chain and be part of the global value chain and major player in the global value chain? Mr. Thakur.
Thank you, Dun Bradstreet, for giving me this opportunity of sharing my views. Non-participation of India in global value chain has been a thing that we have been discussing for quite some time. See, given the growing importance of global value chain in today's economy, I think there is need to bring measures to foster, I would say, India's inclusion into international production process. Actually, what is GVC? What is global value chain? Actually, all said and done, it is actually internationalization of production process. That for making a particular product, you have components and intermediates made in various geography depending on the cost and other implications. So currently, approximately 60% of the world trade actually takes place through global value chain. The old era of trade between firm versus firm is now getting fast replaced by trade between supply chain versus supply chain. But unfortunately, the Indian manufacturing is marked by almost near non-participation in most of the global value chain. Products manufactured in GVCs account for, like I said, 60 to 70% of the world trade. But India's share is meager. As a result of this, what has happened is that India does not manufacture most of the electronic, telecom, or high-tech products, as manufacturing of these products require participation in GVC. And consequently, we have to import these items in large quantities, which of course impacts our trade balance and all. Becoming part of the high value-added activities of GVC is critical for Indian manufacturing, as products manufacturing in GVC, like I said, accounts for a huge share of the world trade in non-full manufactured products. So the question that begs an answer, the million-dollar question is actually, why does India not participate in GVC? Is it out of its own volition, or what actually hinders? The answer is that India cannot ensure quick export and import clearances. Now, why the requirement of faster clearances? Now, we should understand that what happens in the global value chain. Manufacturing of most of the technology products in global value chain actually a multi-stage process involving production collaboration among firms located in several countries, several geographies. And the components and sub-assemblies manufactured in one country is exported to another country for next stage of processing. And the manufacturing could be stage-wise, could be sequential, or could be simultaneous. So this process repeats as the semi-finished goods travel across the border several times at different stage of processing. So to ensure efficient production, the system binds all participation to just-in-time production and supply schedule. Now, this requires real quick export-import clearance at each stage, and that is where India falters. See, any delay at any port or customs may create disruption in the entire value chain in the subsequent stage of production and upset the entire schedule. And obviously, the defaulting firm in the country may risk being tossed out of the network in such a scenario. The message is very loud and clear. A country cannot think of participating in global value chain unless it has high quality customs and port infrastructure capable of faster export and import clearances. Fast entry and exit through port is a precondition to making such products. As delays, will disrupt, like I told you, the entire value chain. And that's the reason that countries like China, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Malaysia they have all become technology product manufacturing nations and are part of GBC. Through quality trade infrastructure, India has so far not been able to, and it does not meet the benchmark for efficient entry and exit in most of the customers. A lot of issues that I'll discuss. So you see that while India's share in the global mercantile trade is almost 1.7%, its shares in these GVC items, like electronic, telecom, and high-tech products is abysmally low, less than 0.4%. I'll give you an interesting data, and I think you'll be surprised that India has a very weak global share in some of these commodities. Integrated circuits, our share is 0.01%. Mobile phone, 0.19%. LCD, 0.04%. Transistor, 0.14%. I mean, pathetic. So India's insignificant presence in these large basket products have become important, and these are infra-critical products which many countries produce. So India, now what do we export generally? You'll find that 70% of our exports basically target around 30% of the world trade, which are at the lower end of the value chain, which are tolerant of less efficient trade infrastructure. Say, like I'll tell you, our share in rice export is around 39%. Say, small diamonds around 20% or so, buffalo meat, shrimps, almost around 20%. So, because these are the items which are tolerant of less efficient infrastructure, there the time schedule does not matter. The cost is important. So even if there are delays, it doesn't matter much. Now the active participation. Now let me again reiterate that active participation in GVC global value chain is the only sure way of enhancing India's exports. And that GVC model has a basically smiley curve, and I would try to explain through that iPhone example. iPhone or Levi Strauss jeans, these are examples. Say like iPhone, what happens? US prepares the iPhone design and prototypes. The critical components, the intermediates, say like integrated circuits or processors, come from Korea or Taiwan. And the final assembly takes place in China, where, assembled. So at the higher end of the smiley curve are the companies which actually give intellectual capital, they put intellectual capital and earn the most. And then there are at the lower rung of the ladder is the country which assembles and get the least revenue out of it. Now, why is India out of GVC? Like we said, a poor trade infrastructure actually. One thing, the general perception is that poor trade infrastructure can only increase what you call transaction cost in time of export operation. But one doesn't understand that a poor trade infrastructure can not only create problem and can only increase transaction cost, it can almost prohibit a country from participating in GVC, and that is precisely what has happened to India. Now, how do we resolve this problem? That is one thing. So I believe our policy initiative should be to target all the parts of the GVC smiley curve. Like what happens? See, in most of the GVC, you'll find that US, Germany, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, with its R&D expertise, occupy the higher end of the curve. But China, is always at the bottom where assembly takes place. So what India should do is, India should participate, should target all parts of the curve of selected products. Like the top end because of its expertise in R&D, system design, and the low end of the segment of manufacturing to provide jobs, and the high right-hand section of the smiley curve on account of being a large market. So we should target all parts of the smiley curve of the GVC because we have, expertise in each of them. Then secondly, we should set up a national trade network to enable all export-import related compliances online. Have national single window laws, and so more than one time. So that's NTN. What it will do, it will allow all exporters to file all the information and documents online at one place. One will not be required to, interact with each individual agency, whether it is customs or DGFT or shipping companies or port authorities. So there has to be a inbuilt system intelligence which will route all the required information to the appropriate agency, and there should be a service agreement which should bind all the government agencies or even the private agencies to respond within 2-5 hours, so that the all solutions are available online in a seamless manner and end-to-end basis. So India needs this NTN, what you call National Trade Network. That is something I believe which even Niti Aayog has of late advocated. And the most important thing that is required to be done for participation of GBC is to automate port and custom operation and allow green channel clearance for most of the consignments. We know that we have this risk management system in place, but I think there is a lot to be done right now. We need to match our turnaround time of the ships with the global best parameters. We need to shorten the queues, and insurance transaction. I'll give you some data points. See, India's average time taken for border compliance, which means complying with the requirement of customs and port authorities and shipping lines, is almost 85 hours for exports and 307 hours for import. And you compare it with the OECD countries, where it is 12 hours and 9 hours respectively. Similarly, documentary compliance, our time for export and import is 58 and 65 hours respectively, as against the comparable figures for OECD countries, which are 3 and 4 hours. Our turnaround time, is around more than ships in ports is around 2.5 days compared to some 0.97. So, there's a lot of improvement that required to be done. Trader interface requires urgent attention. We need to upgrade our production process. We need to build quality infrastructure. We need to create institutions to develop standards and set up globally accredited testing labs. So I think if we are able to take these small measures with right earnestness, I believe I'm fairly optimistic that India could get into global value chain, and perhaps that is the only way for India to make a quantum jump in exports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thakur. I think that was well said, and that's a really great insight. And I think that's important for all of us, all the stakeholders, to work together in a cohesive way to resolve that issues. And as you rightly said, that is not just one part of this one. It's entire chain has to be basically improved. And I think we have worked as a DNB. We have worked with the government a few years back, where there was project to reach out to some 700 odd exporter importer in the country and understand what the pain they are going through in terms of when they export through those top major port in India. And many recommendations we had, and I think we have seen some improvement on that front as well. So I think there's a thrust, there's a increased focus of the government to improve this, from a factory gate to the port gate and beyond, and those infrastructure has been taken care of. It's not attracting global player, also making us competitive. But I think a lot more needs to be done. I think with that, there are from a company side, the government side, from a stakeholder side, that's fine. I think from a company side, I would ask one question to Mr. Mathur, to you, basically as a follow-up piece, that is Indian company, or are Indian companies ready to reap this benefit, what we're talking about, in terms of the global value chain, or getting into this one, or they're still dependent on the government for the larger support? What is basically Indian companies' preparedness to harness this new age opportunity, what is coming in?
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Singh, and thank you. I think the answer is both yes and no. We have some of the leading champions companies in India which are exporting, having global share, like Mr. Thakur was mentioning. There is a big segment in India which is world-class exporters. They are really champions in their own sector, in their own product lines, and we should be justifiably proud of these champions who are really driving, propelling exports. They really don't depend too much on government. So they are able to manage. They, in spite of government, they have performed phenomenally well. I could, off the top of my head, mention, let's say motorcycle or two-wheeler exports. We are world champions. We can beat the best. In fact, we have beaten the best in the world when it comes to two-wheeler exports. We have captured global markets, and even now with the advent of EV, I'm sure that we will continue to capture the global market, literally with the product end to end. But like is the case, that is not the way forward alone. A lot of intermediary goods, the global value chain, where Indian companies are not willing to become a part of the global value chain because they see a massive opportunity in the Indian market itself. And they see an opportunity to get by lower standard of products. To be a part of the global value chain, you got to have international standards. Now, the problem is that over the last 7, 8 decades, we've still not been able to get our standards set. So though there is the Bureau of Indian Standards and there are all ministries, state governments, still we are producing a large number of not very high tech, low value consumer items, but not to global standards. So that's where the effort of the entire SME ecosystem has to go. Please make your products to a global standard. Either we follow a global standard or we make those standards so high that imports in our country don't happen from other jurisdictions. So the challenge in FTAs and all has been that, India has been flooded by cheap goods. It is not really a question of cheap goods, but of having no standards, what are called the non-tariff barriers. So we need to get working industry by industry, commodity by commodity. So for all the 11,000 odd, there are nearly 11,000 product HS code categories. Each of these 11,000 categories may have 200, 300 products. So it's a huge matrix. There must be millions of products on which you have to have standards. The US market does not have tariffs literally at all, but they have standards for more than 7,800 of these 11,000 items. So even if it is, there is no tariff, you cannot export to US because your standards are low. Your standards don't meet up to what the US has laid down for its consumers to consume. So the problem is we don't talk about standards. We talk about tariffs, we talk about costs, we talk about logistics, we talk about all these things. But the bottom line is, even if you were to get very good interest rates, very good turnaround time in ports, you'll still not be able to penetrate those markets because the entire manufacturing base in India is not manufacturing to those standards. So efforts have begun, ministry by ministry, this work is happening. And for literally every product line, every product component, the country needs standards, whether they'll be set by industry bodies, and of course, they're all private sector industry bodies. They have to get together and agree on the standards. And then this transformation will occur that we will lead in setting the standards. And then other countries will not be able to dump low quality products in our markets just because there is free trade. Obviously you have to move towards that era, but you have to regulate by standards. So that conversation, I don't see happening at the industry level. That's where I feel Indian private sector needs a little more cajoling and pushing so that please get together, set up global standards, or at least approach over an incremental period internationally accepted standards, set standards where there are none, and then drive the global value chain. So it's to your question, I think Indian companies are ready. They're more than ready. They are already performing very well. Literally, if government was to get out of the way, they could capture global markets. The time to export should be really drastically cut down. Time should cut down. To imports, yes, there are issues. We need to still have we cannot have porous borders with our neighbors, with other countries. But the bottom line is the PM Gati Shakti is exactly about all this. From the logistic cost of 14%, we got to bring it down to 9%. So this 5% cut in logistics is happening with the national logistics platform, which is coming up. 16 ministries, about 24 digital platforms. They'll get together. So a large number of infra projects will help that happen. It may take time, but of course, the logistic costs shall come down. They've already started coming down from 14%. Now I think the figure is about 12%. but there is still a gap there. But more critical in my mind is the need for very high standards going forward for Indian SME and mid-cap companies also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathur. I think that was great insight. And absolutely, there's no doubt that the concern today is infrastructure. Concern today is logistic cost, and concern today is basically the time taken. And there was a lot of improvement happened, to be very honest. And basically, on the ground, we have seen this. We're talking to companies literally on a daily basis on this aspect, especially in the logistics space. In fact, we have just launched rail freight index with some of our partner, and that's basically indicate that logistic costs I've said to come down, and that's a great things happening, because that will provide some focus, some space to the company, so that at least they can focus on the second part, what you call, we just mentioned about the quality and the standard. Because when you're talking about that piece, I think the primary part has to basically let go, which someone is already managing, and that's happening, and we see that's happening. And I think you brought that point fairly, that standard and quality matters. Otherwise, you're not going to capture what we're talking about. The world have moved on, and we're still talking about 30-year-old product, 30-year-old standard, or 50-year-old standard. It's not going to work. So thanks for that insight. Now, with that, I'll switch to the other side of the equation, from India to, and I think you mentioned about some cooperation happening across the various countries. And I saw Dr. Badrija join. Welcome, sir. And I'm basically coming to you in terms of next question is that how you see India is competing with other Asian markets for the trade within Asia, as we all know that majority of the countries have already joined the RCEP. And what is your viewpoint, Mr. Dr. Badri?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Singh, and apologies for the delay in joining. I was in another meeting. But I completely agree with Mr. Thakur and Mr. Mathur on the various points that they raised. And they're also relevant for the question that you just asked me, because of course, RCEP is one of the, it's probably the largest multilateral or plurilateral trade deal. It involves a lot of countries in Asia and the Pacific, so one thing before getting into how India is going to deal with this is the various points that Mr. Mathur just mentioned. Even when we have a free trade agreement, even when we are part of a trade deal, it's going to be dependent. The benefits are going to be dependent on how much the companies are going to proactively pursue it, proactively get into the markets by improving the standards and quality. And when I have interactions with many importers in other countries and the governments and industry bodies, one thing they say is that there is often lack of interest or initiative from the industry itself. Like, even many times you don't need a trade deal to start the discussion, the negotiations in terms of exports, finding markets, and so on. So I think that there the industry has to be proactive, and that is also very related to what you asked now, because in the context of RCEP, obviously the members have got greater access to each other's markets. So here, we all know that RCEP is a relatively shallow agreement. It's not a very deep, comprehensive agreement. And I think probably Mr. Thakur may talk later about the trade agreements that we are signing, and some of them are quite comprehensive. So RCEP is more of a signaling agreement, where saying that we're all together, and of course the tariffs are reduced, so there is some market access thing, but at the same time it's not that comprehensive or deep. So in that sense, the gains from RCEP for each of our competitors, India's competitors there, are not tremendous, but they are significant. They are still considerable and significant. So in this context, how do we compete with them, there are many strategies. One, from the policy point of view, from the government's point of view, which is basically to proactively sign, trade deals with each of the RCEP members. So we have been very close to being successful with Australia, for example, and I think that's also progressing well. And we already have agreement with ASEAN, so ASEAN is already there. With Japan, also we have a deal before. So we have covered many of the countries in RCEP already. The only major country we have not covered there is China, which is anyway a difficult partner, as we all know. So I think in this context, I think from the government point of view, we are doing the best in the sense that we are trying to get these trade agreements individually with the countries, and there are sectors where we can gain a lot by access to these countries, and there are sectors that are sensitive, which are being taken into account in the negotiations. And so that is the first aspect. Second aspect is the going back to the private sector initiatives. So I think that has to be there. We cannot avoid disruptions coming from the RCEP agreement itself, in terms of how these countries have got together. They have got greater market access. There is greater value chain integration, global value chain integration among these countries. So there are going to be a lot of spillover effects on us, and we have to be ready to face that. And long ago, we did a study on TPP and India, when TPP was in the making, Trans-Pacific Partnership. So one of the findings we had was that, okay, we are not part of TPP. We are not also part of many other bilateral negotiations at that point. This is before ourselves. What can we do then if we are not part of that? So what can we do as an industry, as a agglomeration of industries, is that we have to understand the various tenets of these agreements. What are the various standards that are coming up? What are the various institutional changes that are coming up because of these agreements in these countries? And how can we as a country, as a combination of many industries, how do we get ready for that? Because since these people have decided all these rules among themselves and we have not been part of that, it is quite possible that we may be some of these may be imposed on us indirectly, because many of them are our trading partners. I think that is where we have to work together and try to identify ways in which we can upgrade our systems, and all the points mentioned before are valid here: infrastructure, quality, and all those things. I think that's what I would say. What can we do as policymakers, and what can we do as industries? These two.
Thank you, Dr. Badri, and that was a good viewpoint. And I think we are all looking to capitalize this gain what we have already seen and from the signing. So let's see how future holds for all of us. That's great. Now, in that context, I think we've spoke a lot in terms of infrastructure, logistic performance. What I say in a nutshell, which basically World Bank is not talking about nowadays, basically ease of doing business. And government have taken various initiatives, ease of doing business across borders. And with that, I'll come to you, Professor Joshi, on basically government have taken initiatives, no doubt about this one. Out of all the schemes run for Indian exporter, which scheme you feel, you think, according to research or the data, that have benefited most to the exporters community? Because that's I think what we are talking about. So at least government can take a cue and move in that direction, that this is working. Let's make it, or let's maximize that piece. Professor Joshi.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. You are asking a very, very tough question, that which one scheme is the best. Very difficult to answer, because no one scheme can be best. Rather, each of the schemes that we have got for export promotion, they supplement each other. And therefore, I cannot say that you have one scheme and you abandon all. So we need to have a mix of those schemes. And if you see that something which again, if you see is probably best is the Gati Shakti scheme. And why Gati Shakti is the, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You
Why
can.
Gati Shakti is, as you are aware, that there in India, what I feel is the exporters in India, they are very innovative. MSMEs are very innovative. They don't require incentive for the government, but they require what from the government is let them work and give them an ecosystem where they can function freely. Because if you see the innovation, innovativeness, and entrepreneurship can only come in the private sector and the corporate sector, absolutely not in government. The task of government is governance and not business. There is no business of the government to do the business, and therefore what we require is to create an ecosystem. Now what is this ecosystem? One is the infrastructure, as you are aware. Now I'll give you a very small example. You talk of transportation, the cost of transportation of goods from Delhi, and I'll give you a better example from Amritsar to port in Mumbai or Kandla. After partition, something which was going from Amritsar to a Karachi port, the port journey has become almost tripled. And now it increased the cost of the cost of transportation, shipping, especially in countries like China. 45 to 48% of the cargo flows inland waterways. Now India, after independence, our inland waterways river system is almost closed and rivers are dead. Now, one thing I think which we have done very recently in the last 5-7 years is to revive this inland cargo system, wherein the cost of transportation in the inland waterways is say 1/6 to 1/8 that what cost take on the road transport. So these are small things. Now, if you see the Gati Shakti is probably one scheme which takes consideration of all modes of transport: air, inland transport, ship, road, rail, everything. Another thing is, it also, we also had that scheme of that Sagarmala kind of a scheme. Port, if you see the port
Yeah.
infrastructure is very critical sector. I'll give you a very small example. Single place Jebel Ali in Dubai, the capacity, the turnaround capacity of vessel in Jebel Ali, Dubai is more than all, handling capacity of the port of India taken together. Then if you see the mother port like Singapore, Dubai, India, we do not have that. So the infrastructure is one that scheme. But I think let me tell, because you have got a variety of participants. Another thing, I think the one wonderful scheme which has come is the PLI scheme. Now PLI is the production linked incentive. Earlier government thought that you give some incentive here and there, some duty concession, some tax rebate here and there, and export in India will boom up. It will never happen. And therefore, the PLI scheme is probably the first time a scheme where it has recognized a specific sector and those linked scheme have been given. So this is another one. And very important scheme which I think we have made it WTO compatible is the remission of duties and taxes on the export goods. This is RODTP. Now, under the all the international, the international norms, you export the cost but not the duties. We had earlier various types of schemes. We have a scheme on duty drawback. We have certain schemes that earlier we have that CCS, cash compensatory support scheme. Now these schemes were not not compatible with the WTO, number one. And second thing was there was a lot of leakage and seepage in the whole system. So I'm very sure that these schemes are coming, especially the RODTP will also, protect the seepage and big. One thing which has absolutely perfect scheme, and probably the first time the government has paid attention, I'm absolutely moved from this. If the export promotion effort goes to the district level never before. If you see the constitution in India, foreign trade is the function of the central government and not of the state government. The state governments are absolutely not worried about export so far. Now, if you see about export, for a chief minister in a district or a chief secretary of a district collector, they are worried about the burning problem in the district, which is poverty, the basic rural infrastructure, and absolutely export is no priority. Why they should? You are having very senior bureaucrat, you ask them, they will tell you the truth. This is probably the first time that we
Yeah.
have involved the district. Now, earlier also, I think for last 20 years, we had SLEPC, State Level Export Promotion Council, headed by Chief Secretary. We also had a system, introduced a system where there was one export commissioner. You go to the state, ask who is the export commissioner. I am not mincing the word, wherein the export commissioner himself does not know that I am nominated as the export commissioner, because this task was given to the industries commissioner most of the time, who had absolutely no idea what about exporting. District commissioners, divisional commissioners, district collectors have absolutely no idea about export. This is probably the first time, probably the last year itself, wherein I think the government of India, we interacted with each of the district collectors. And not only this, now with this scheme of the one product, one district scheme, and the district level export promotion committees. The thing was very difficult. Now we are also collecting the data at district level.
Yeah.
Now India is a multicultural country, multi-geographical country. So, one scheme does not fit into. And I think you see into, there are certain, bottlenecks in implementation of various schemes that I will, not like to discuss here. But something is when the district administration, it is the district collector or the industries or the divisional they understand the significance of importance, and they need to understand that to increase the economic standard of the people in the district, you need to export. I'll give you an example. Like in China, the secret of success in China was the export-led growth. Export-led growth. And I think India, we have a long way to go. They have 14.5% share in the world, exports. India's share is 1.6%, 1.7%. So I think you need to understand, all those things. You also need to understand that, there is a German saying that, if everybody is going forward and you are standing still, you are automatically going backward. I'll give you an
Thank you.
example. When India became independent, India's share in the world export was almost 2.56%. Today, India's share with all the export promotion measures and so many 27 export promotion councils, we brought it down to 1.7%. There was a time we brought it down to the India's share in the export to 0.4%. And China, whose share was 0.9% in 47, they have become the largest exporter in the world with 14% share. India, with a lot of hostility with China remains the prime source of import even today. So I think all these things need to be looked into. But I'm very sure
Thank
that,
you.
the kind of the schemes which
Yeah.
we have formulated in last 2-3 years, in case they are implemented properly, and I like to tell one more thing. Mathur Saab has raised a very important issue of the non-tariff barrier. Today, the secret of success in the
Yeah.
international market is non-tariff barrier. Two things: improvement of the quality at the domestic level, but more than that, our fighting with the international organizations wherein these are created barriers in the whole market. India is the largest exporter of milk on the earth, but most of the major markets, our milk product you cannot export. They say that if you do not have milk by the captive dairy farm, it's unfit for us. And I think there are a lot of things that you can discuss. Cheddar
Yeah.
cannot be manufactured in any part of the world other than the cheddar region of that. So I think all these things
Thank
we
you.
need to look
Yes, sir.
into a comprehensive fashion.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir. Thank you for such a elaborate version. And we are running short of time, and I'm conscious about this fact. I think there are few questions already started flowing in, and I think one quick, and I think Mr. Mathur, I'll come to you. There's a lot of things happening on this, and I just need your 1 minute answer to this one. And sorry for giving that timeline. Is that we're talking about many elements. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about the product and quality and standards. We're talking about, I think, Mr. Mathur talking about. So this question is to Mr. Thakur, sir. How are the Indian companies positioned to capture the increasing export share with regard to product quality and standard? So your answer in within 1 minute, please. Mr. Thakur, that was to you. Sir, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Oh, you want this question to be answered in a minute?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll try and see. See, the point is, your question was regarding increasing exports with regard to quality standards.
Basically, how Indian companies are positioned to capture the increasing export share with regard to quality of the product standard. Basically, we're talking about that element.
Give me a couple of minutes. See. Recently, I think if you ever heard, our minister was on record he was exhorting industry members to basically adopt, the domestic and international. To study domestic and international quality standards, and he requested them to adopt quality standards voluntarily and happily, and build industry, in a manner to meet global quality standards. Now the question is whether Indian companies are really prepared and geared up to face this challenge. I mean, that's like our earlier panel members have already spoken, that with the reduction in tariff barriers have been accompanied with a proportionate or more than proportionate increase in non-tariff barriers like regulatory compliances, safety, quality certifications, packaging, labeling, testing, and all that, TBT and SPS measures. So there is a synergistic relationship between standards and trade, and adherence to trade actually enhances the potential of trade, right? And it would signal quality to customers. It would reduce what we call information asymmetry. So, and high quality products in itself actually is the best advertisement of the product. So quality is the mantra. Now, point is whether Indian, and this is challenge not only of India. Exporters from most of the developing countries, they're increasingly feeling the pressure to conform to international standards. I mean, much have been achieved in some of the countries, but there's a lot that requires to be done. Now, where do we stand? See, we all know that made in India products, to be very candid, by and large, do not enjoy that great reputation in markets abroad. Unlike Japan and Korea, we all know that. We have had issues with traces of pesticides in some agricultural products, or illegal dyes, or pathogens, and all that. So we face these issues, with regard to compliance of standards. Government has done a lot of initiative, but whether we have a long distance to travel, and the major, the challenge comes from developed countries, I would say, because like European Union, it's a highly discerning market, and it presents, serious challenge in the area of sanitary and phytosanitary standards and technical standards. So they are actually, we need to actually gear up. Indian farms basically need to upgrade production process and product quality to meet the requirements. We have been able to do to some extent, but whether we are able to really overcome it, I would say there's a long distance to travel. What government has done, I can briefly tell you, because the government's commitment is to basically convert India into manufacturing exporting hub, and that's only possible, like Mr. Mathur said, that unless we adopt the standards and our standards are acceptable to the most discerning market, then only probably it will be possible. So what we require to do, and probably, there is a roadmap which we are moving on, that we need to establish more globally, accredited test labs, probably enhance capacities of Indian testing labs. We should sign, what you call MRAs, mutual recognition agreements with partner countries to basically accept our standards. Government has improved quality standards through quality control measures, standards and mark and all that. And we have, created a database for SPS and TBT measures which are getting notified in WTO and member countries. So a lot of things are being done, but then, because increasingly we know the developed world, they would create a rules architecture and they would create a standard architecture manner that it will place a greater burden of compliance on India's manufacturing and services standards. So we need to actually meet that. And the challenge is that actually every line ministry in the government actually should identify their products. Each regulator should review its technical standards and identify the gaps, and then probably lay down realistic time frame for bridging these gaps. And also what is necessary actually is that we promote awareness about standards and regulations and conformity assessment procedure everywhere. Unless we do that, it would be difficult to penetrate the market of developed countries, and you know that our exports there to European Union and US is almost 30%. So I think even to retain that particular share, we need to gear up and work very systematically towards developing standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thakur, for such a short answer. And sorry for that. I think we are heading towards end of the session. Actually, we are already timed out, and there are many questions coming in, and I think there are a couple of things. And Naina, if you want to ask, Naina.
Thank you, Dr. Arun Singh. In fact, I was listening to this conversation, and I have a lot of notes, which I think will be very helpful as key takeaways for our audiences. And I must say, we've been a lot of questions have been asked. It's been raining questions. So without further ado, I'll just ask the questions. The first question is from Mr. Paresh Desai, and this is for you, Mr. Mathur. The question goes like this: how can you throw light on how existing standards, which are similar to global ones, can be enforced? So they've written here, and I will just quote it the way it's written by Mr. Desai. Take IS for electrical goods, say bulb or tube lights or street lights, for example. Mr. Mathur, would you want me to repeat the question, or have you kind of?
No, I got the question, but I couldn't really understand what is he trying to say. So if there is an Indian standard which is not acceptable globally in other markets, so this is the mutual recognition agreements that Mr. Thakur mentioned. So you cannot force any other jurisdiction to accept your standards. But if there is an international standards, these are all issues of dialogue and discussions. And this is where the leveraging power of our country will come in play. So if there is a specific issue on tube lights and bulbs, that thing you may like to get your industry association to represent. And I'm sure the government of India will take it up very actively, including through our embassies. I think one thing we need to also acknowledge that over the last couple of years, the Indian missions abroad are really champions of exporters. So do reach out to the Indian missions, tell them your specific granular problems in a particular jurisdiction. If there is any discrimination to Indian goods in that country being exported, then do take it up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mathur. The next question is from Mr. Nitin Sahani, and he's not addressed it to anybody in specific, so anyone can take a stab at it. It goes like this: how does a payment system work? Means not even knowing the US. And how do we transact and settle the currencies? So I think what he's trying to say is that if we are working with countries like the US, and if we want to understand how to transact in these countries and settle the currencies, what would be the important steps that we would need to kind of be aware of? So I guess that's what Mr. Sahani means. Anyone can take a step. Yes, Mr.
May I take a shot? I've been a banker. See, one of the things we could not cover in today's discussion is the trade finance. I think which was a very important thing which we missed out because other things, there were too many theoretical things we talked about. See, very granularly to your community, Dun Bradstreet, please reach out through trade facilitation on trade finance. See, the trade finance is the biggest problem. Standards are there, all those issues are there, but availability of trade finance is where our small SME exporters get trapped. The Indian banking system needs to be supported by our proactive exporters and through the policy so that the risks are also taken up by other jurisdictions. For example, if I'm an exporter in Sanganer, Rajasthan, Jaipur, and I'm exporting to Mongolia, and suddenly there is a buyer in Mongolia of Sanganeri print, but he gives me a letter of credit of the First Bank of Mongolia. Now, my bank in Sanganer does not know the First Bank of Mongolia and whether to accept an LC, letter of credit, of that bank. So precious time will be wasted to transact that LC. There will be no confirming bank. It will take weeks maybe for a bank in Hong Kong to come in as a confirming bank. And then the Indian exporter from Jaipur can export to Mongolia. So a lot of trade from India is not happening on the LC. It is happening on what is called the open account. But this is a big tragedy. Bangladesh, a much smaller country than ours, is using 3 times the number of LCs to export. So how are we exporting? We are exporting on the open account. So please move to, when you are exporting to US, get your importer to give you an LC. They will typically say, no, we are a US importer. You send it to us and after 3 months we'll pay you. Don't fall into that trap. Insist on a letter of credit. We have to educate, we have to help, and the LCs, they got a typical language. So we need the government to help out. Now there are new platforms which have come up, very innovative platforms, which are helping in trade financing because the bankers also charge a lot of money. I've been a banker myself, but I know sometimes when you export, you don't know what are the charges that the LC confirmation will end up. So you end up paying 6, 7, 8% of your entire cost just for the LCs. That is too high a cost. So please bring down the bankers' cost, work on LCs, don't do open exports.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Mathur. This is really interesting, and I think all our exporters need to be very well educated on all these aspects, especially, and understand where these documents are placed so that they can kind of download it, read it, and come back and ask questions as well. Of course, we are running out of time. We've exceeded by about 13 minutes. We'll take the last 2 questions. So the second last question is again not addressed to anybody in specific. It goes like this. Is DSIR recognition to in-house R&D centers beneficial for global companies present in India for a cross-border business? If yes, how? Anyone can take a stab at it. Do you want me to repeat the question, sir?
Yeah, we can come back at that, and maybe we can reply it offline. And yeah.
All right. So the last question here now, which again is something that every Indian company could relate to, and I think this is very pertinent for us as well. Do we give more importance to the need of doing business across borders when we have a huge opportunity and market available in India? So this is from Ravindranath Sharma. And what are the areas where we should be doing business across the borders, and other than teach other nations about? So the second part is like incomplete, but the first part was quite interesting, saying that do we need to first focus on the Indian market and then build our capacities to move business across borders, or how is it? Like very interesting, but I mean, we would love to know your views. So yes,
No,
Professor.
I absolutely disagree with you, because it is not that you do the business within the country, because the uh, it's a absolutely not a good idea that you focus only on your country. If you see the if you go to the international business or the across the borders, you have pressure to improve the quality, you have pressure to improve the process, and unless you go to the international market, you will fail in the domestic market itself. Now I'll tell you why. Because today you are buying multiple things, the multiple products that you are using. You are buying these products from foreign companies or multinational companies which are marketing across, right from a soft drink to a pen to a pen to the pencil. Why? Because the international market are absolutely unlimited from the firm's perspective, and it gives you opportunity to introspect yourself. Like we were talking of the standards, the quality standard. Unless you are an international market and you are selling in the domestic market, you have no pressure about the quality, you have no pressure about the systems. So I think it will bring efficiency to you, it will increase your profitability, and not only that in the international market, but your success in the international market will make you successful in the domestic market. Another thing, that if there are the price upheavals in the domestic market, it will hedge against you, and therefore the beyond borders is probably one thing that would hedge against you. So I think don't fall into the trap of being confined to the domestic market. Don't close your door. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Joshi. In fact, I do have a smile on my face because ultimately it's important for us to push ourselves to become more competitive in nature. And that's only possible if we move away from our comfort chair.
I'll tell you one
As
more thing. Why Dun Bradstreet is competitive? Because it's not a homegrown company. Because these people know how to operate across the border. Otherwise, you could have attended a seminar by the local chamber of business and commerce, and that would absolutely not given you the quality that I think this has given to you. Because they know how to do it. I don't want to tell you, because the government of India today also appoint the international consultants. Why? Because they have got cross country, the experience.
Best
I am also
practices.
involved in restructuring of various government designs, and I think we work on that. So I think it's not a good idea. Thank you so much.
Well, Professor Joshi, I would love to kind of agree to disagree on this, because after listening to all the panelists here, I really feel it should be the other way around. We should have our Indian, eminent personalities to act as consultants, because we as a country are very diverse, and I think we bring a lot more on board. And to work in a country like India is no easy cakewalk. So sorry, but be
No, no,
Indian
no,
and
no, no, no problem. And this is because I was going through your brochure, and you have already written that your global chief economist comes only from India. So compliments to you, Saika.
Absolutely, and he's an Indian, sir. And he's an Indian, sir. Well, I must also, before I conclude, I must say that Dr. Arun Singh has, and rather has led this project. But on behalf of Dun Bradstreet, we've published a paper on the Ukraine-Russia crisis, and it is available on our website. So for all our exporters, please do download that copy and understand what it means for the Indian business, what it means for the global supply chain, and what are the key highlights, and moving forward, how, of course, it's dynamic. And I'm sure Dr. Arun Singh would has really worked very hard on that. So please download your copy. But at the same time, more importantly, you have the Business Across Borders publication up live and it will be in your inboxes, ladies and gentlemen. So please do that. And without further ado, I would like to first thank all our eminent panelists, Mr. Thakur, Mr. Mathur, Mr. Narayan, Professor Joshi, and rather Dr. Narayan. My apologies, and Professor Joshi. And last but not the least, Dr. Arun Singh, thank you so very much. I was intently listening to all the discussion, and I'm only beaming with pride that we have such eminent personalities who give us the guidance, who are absolutely knowledgeable, and you all are the pride of our country. So thank you so much for taking time out from a busy schedules and gracing this event. And last but not the least, I would like to kind of thank you guys for all. Thank all of you. My apologies. Thank all of you for also orchestrating this entire session and making and giving us some brilliant takeaways. And before I move to the conclusion, the actual conclusion of the event, I would like to also tell everyone that your feedback is very important. Please do share your feedback. I hope you had a fantastic session and a lot of key takeaways. And of course, on our platform, we have a feedback feature, and you can share your comments and suggestions, and of course, your overall experience as well. I thank you again for all our partners for their invaluable support, without which this event wouldn't have been a success. Last but not the least, thank you, all of you, for participating at the event, all our dignitaries for taking time out from their schedules and making this a grand success. Thank you very much. This is Tena Acharya signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. Thank you again.